What we're doing now is building a system where there's a single point of integration, and one of our main KPIs is just get another carrier on board as quickly as possible.
Now that you joined Wayfair and you are one of the important key leaders building the global carrier platform, can you tell us a little bit about this platform? What is it good for? And maybe we can go into the details afterwards.
Yeah, I think one thing that's maybe not surprising, but one thing you have to understand about Wayfair, it's been growing very fast for a number of years now, and I think I would call this growth from a systems perspective kind of organic, especially when you get into kind of the EU side of things, where we got a mandate. And when did we come to the EU? Like 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
With the kind of the mandate, just establish a market position however you can, right? Get a set up a delivery network on the ground, find suppliers, find carriers. And starting this year, we've really kind of made a concerted effort to, okay, let's consolidate this and let's kind of professionalize our system. Let's move away from a monolithic architecture. And our particular group, Wayfair Global Platform, was kind of formed around the idea that, okay, let's form teams around single sources of truth. So around a carrier source of truth, around a supplier source of truth, give them a global mandate, which was new for us here in Berlin and super exciting. And we're basically responsible for all things carrier. And our goal is to basically represent or kind of expose a very heterogeneous bunch of carriers through generic interfaces to the rest of the company. So that if you so we're in a system now where different systems along the supply chain might have different ways of integrating with carriers, right? And that obviously brings a lot of overhead, brings a lot of complexity, and just kind of stretches out the time it takes to onboard a carrier to our system. What we're doing now is building a system where there's a single point of integration, and one of our main KPIs is just get another carrier on board as quickly as possible. So I think it's a good example of how we're trying to kind of flatten the carrier landscape for the rest of the company. And probably the second thing that's worth mentioning is we have a lot of kind of improvised tool sets that some of our frontline operational colleagues use. A lot of Google Sheets, to be perfectly honest. And I think our job going forward will be to get this out of, okay, a frontline operations person is responsible for getting their own data, and get them more into the mode where we give them the data they need in a timely fashion, in an intuitive way, with well-built tools that speak to their use cases. And they can concentrate more on strategy instead of just getting the data together to figure out what's happening on the ground. So
I know that it's not really easy to build that platform, and even coming up with great ideas and plans is not enough. So what are the biggest challenges for you today when building the platform?
I think the biggest challenge is probably the heterogeneity, if that's a word. Yeah, the incredible nuance of the data we work with. I mean, the wildly varying technical sophistication of the carriers we work with means that it's pretty hard to standardize data. And even more than that, to communicate to our stakeholders where this nuance is in the data and why maybe the data is not behaving in ways they expect. So a lot of our job is kind of taming the data, building tools on top of the state of the data the way it is right now, finding ways to improve the data on a steady basis. So that also gets us a lot more into like process work. How can we improve kind of the relationship with carriers to get better data into the system and things like this. So it is a data job. A lot of what we do are data tasks, and the quality of the data varies greatly. And that's kind of one of our main challenges, is kind of making sure we're always making progress on improving the quality of the data we provide to our users.
Many stakeholders and users depend on the platform you built today. And on a day-to-day basis, when they have problems, issues, they come to you, ask questions, and they need solutions, urgent for their urgent needs. On the other side, we expect you and your team to come up with durable missions, long-term value, and build roadmaps. So how do you balance that? How do you make sure that you deliver for urgent short-term needs and then build roadmaps for a couple of years?
Yeah. That's a great question. I think that's kind of the essence of product work in a lot of ways. Um, yeah, always kind of how do you make the trade-offs between short-term firefighting, basically, and kind of building sustainable systems in the long term. I think a lot of what we do comes back to the issue of transparency. So first of all, really making clear to stakeholders like what the trade-offs are, saying, okay, here's a product manager who can answer your questions and help you out and solve this problem right now. But this means that probably this other project that you've been involved in will be pushed back accordingly a little bit. Are you aware of this trade-off? Can we make this together? I think it's worth it in this case, or maybe it's not worth it in this case for this reason. Yeah, and it's also kind of an art with the team members, trying to have a feel for how much time they're spending on ad hoc queries into the data, to make sure they're not just spending all their time kind of responding to firefighting things without being too intrusive and micromanaging. And that's kind of the art of kind of of managing this big data machine we're sitting on top of. So.